little bit of a recap. We're talking about Sisera, which was a captain of a Canaanite army. The Canaanite Jael was the king, and he had tormented the Israelites for 20 years. That's a long time to be put up with. You know, that we look at the Ukraine. They've been into that war with Russia for 4 years, and they're just devastated. Imagine being put up with this other king coming in, stealing stuff, raiding your cities for 20 years. And we're talking about the period of judges. And I've always thought, well, okay, God raises up a judge to lead these people and get them back on the straight and narrow. But I thought about it today. Maybe I'm wrong, but how about the people that are rising up against Israel? Aren't they judging Israel? Sisera was and Jael were, in a way, they were judges against Israel because they're not following God. So it can be kind of read both ways. The judges God raised up to get them back to where they need to be, and the judges that God raised up from the foreign countries to tell them they need to be get back where they need to be, to push them that way. I guess in a sense it pushes them because they get sick of this foreign God, this foreign country, this foreign king keeps raiding and tormenting us. We can't do anything. We're like their slaves. We need to get back to God. And that's what God wanted the whole time. So it's a big...
And Randall, sometimes when things are going good in general, let's say, you know, we've all had the experience of talking to people in certain religions. And even though they might not be religious, when you start to talk against their religion, then they get really religious. I think what happens is when people attack other countries like that it brings that country together. You know, and so it's this irritant. When things are going smooth, oftentimes people forget about God. But when the situation gets a little tougher, like happened to these people, then they start looking closer to God. That's probably the reason that they were being attacked all this time.
Yes, I think you would find, and I heard it said, maybe I don't have the facts right, but I heard it said that there were more people in church after 9/11 than there was before. You had an uprising of American spirit after 9/11. It's kind of like kick a sleeping dog, basically. And that's basically what they're doing here. These people come in here and get after Israel, and they get woke up. Man, we need to get back to God. Well, duh. It takes you 20 years to get to this point. You know, and then they'll have 20 or 40 years of good time, and we'll forget God. I'm okay. And that's the big circle they make all the way through Judges. So this dawned on me today. Maybe the judges are the people that's coming in to overtake Israel. They're judging them, just like God's going to judge us one day. You know, it's so there's Sisera. He is a captain. He has 900 chariots, and I think I was reading today that Solomon in his height, he had 1,200 chariots. I guess a chariot is a big thing to have back in those days. You know, you could take, I guess, a chariot to run over people, and it was very hard to defend against a chariot. You know, so that's what he was. They said he was a very how should we put it? A very manly man. He when he spoke, people listened. They said he would shake the walls, and I guess he didn't. Do I need that microphone tonight? I'm not like Sisera. I'm not shaking the walls, but everybody can hear me okay? Y'all hear me too? Okay. They're good. Okay, so yes, it was there's Sisera. And God sent a storm, a rainstorm, what I understand, what I read from the Jewish commentaries, that God sent a rainstorm, and it was just like the Egyptians in the Red Sea. That thing won't steer. You can't make the horse pull it, and these chariots are useless in a mud hole. And that's what he got into. And they said every last one of his army, every one of them fell to the sword except him. And he broke and run. Didn't work out too good for him, but he did break and run. So that's where we get to Deborah. Who is Deborah?
She's a female judge, a prophet.
The female judge, right? The only one, yep. She is a prophetess and a judge of Israel. And the judge on Israel's side, not the judges coming in to judge them. So, and she got the message from God, I guess. We need to get, is it Barak or Barak? I guess it's Barak, isn't it? Barak. You need to get Barak, and we need to go up on Mount Tabor, I believe it was, and we're going to face Sisera, and you're going to take him on. He had, and that was the big scream. He had 900 chariots. How are we going to do that? Take 10,000 men with you and go and attack him. Take him on. This is Deborah's message to Barak. And Barak, how did he? That was good news for him, wasn't it? No, I'm not going down there. I'll go if you go. But no, I'm not going without you. And what did Deborah tell him?
Crack's gonna go to a woman.
He's going to follow to a woman. He's right. All the glory's going to go to a woman. Now you would think she's talking about herself, wouldn't you? I mean, she's a woman. She's a judge. She's leading the army basically, and she's begging him to come on, go with her. You do it. You take the lead. It's your battle. It's yours to win. God said it. No, I'm not going. Well, there's a woman going to get all the credit. You would think it would be her talking about herself, but she wasn't. But yes, it was a big deal, and a lot of people today use Deborah to justify having women elders, women preachers, women leaders. I don't know what else you could do. I mean, pastors, I guess that's an elder if you really know what you're talking about. But that's the way they look at it. So that's what they used this here was. She was a leader and all that, but she wasn't a spiritual leader. She was a judge. And it says here that if you read on page 54, at the very bottom, notice some factors even in Deborah's special situation that confirm she understood the limits of her womanhood. She knew her place. Deborah's judging took place on a personal basis under the tree, not in public worship or assembly. Okay. At this time, who is the leader of the government of Israel? We don't have a king.
They did what was right in their own eyes.
Okay, but who would they have looked to first of all? I mean,
A judge, if there was one.
a judge if they had one, or the priest, high priest. You would think that's where they would look first, but yeah, okay. Sir.
Go back, I don't want anybody to go flutter or nothing, but how, we're under the law of Moses, right?
Right.
So how does she know that she's not supposed to be, how does she know the limits of a woman?
Because she's a woman.
You have to go home with somebody.
Well, they didn't have women priests, did they? They didn't have, there was no women in the priesthood.
Was there laws about that, though?
Well, I guess there was examples.
I'm just saying, the New Testament, obviously, we got clear scripture.
True.
It talks about that, but in the Old Testament, I'm real confused about, what kind of scriptures we have.
Apparently, there wasn't a law that said they couldn't have a female judge because they had one. God chose her.
But we know they're prophetesses. We know
True.
that, right? So,
But they would have not been any priests. I think the priests were all the sons of Aaron. I think it specified sons. Okay. The priesthood would have been, I think that would have taken care of that problem. A judge, ma'am?
I was just thinking about the story of Esther, about how the queen wouldn't obey the king, and the men were in upset because they said, now our women won't obey us. So at least they knew that women were in subjection.
But that wasn't even a Jewish country.
So maybe the Israelites should know more about that.
Well, the Israelites should have known more about it. That's,
But just the fact that, they knew that
yeah, but
there
that
was
wasn't
a
even Jewish.
hierarchy in the marriage.
Yeah, that was, what was the name of the king that she was under? I can't think of his name. Xerxes?
Yeah. Well, even
Still, that was
Abraham,
another country. That was
Sarah
a
called him
Canaanite.
Lord, I mean, they knew their place, right?
I don't know.
You
I don't know. I mean, you assume they would know this. It's a thing that's gone on for years and years. That's a good question. I'll let Greg handle that later. I've never really thought about how did they know that wasn't acceptable. I don't know. As far as the priesthood would have been men.
Never happened before her.
Never happened before her, and apparently there was nothing wrong with being a judge because God, called her for that purpose, but He didn't call her to be a priest. He didn't call her to be an elder. Yes?
I think it's just the way things were. Adam was, the head of the household. You had the patriarchs, Abraham, and I think it's just the father was the patriarch of the family, and I think it's just the way that it was. And back then it was women were considered second class, and it was kind of known. I don't think there's necessarily a law against it per se, but just that's the way it was designed.
So that you're saying that like Abraham, God spoke to Abraham, He really didn't speak to Sarah. He didn't, okay.
But he was in charge.
He was in charge, yeah.
Adam was in charge.
The house band.
Esau, so on.
But as far as the law, I really haven't I never thought about that. How did they know? It could be like Kevin said, it's just something that's been done from day one. And I mean, God didn't speak to Sarah when they're over in the other country before He left there and came to Canaan. He spoke to Abraham. Get out of your country. Go to a place I'll show you. He's always spoken. That's why they call it the patriarchal era. It wasn't the moms, it was the dad. The fathers, the head of the household. So that's a hard way to prove it. That you need a do not do kind of statement, but it may be just one of them implied things, and it's just by example. That's the way they've already done it. But anyway, Deborah is in the leadership right now. It's not in a priesthood. She's not one of the elders of the place where they sit at the gate, like, in the book of, was it Ruth, where he had to sit at the gate and find all the family to be able to reconcile the problem with the land, the inheritance and all that. That was the elders sat at the gate, and that's where they took care of their community problems. But that's not what she's doing. She's sitting outside of the city, out under a tree. You got a problem, come to me and we'll fix it. We'll judge it. That was God's choice, not ours. That wasn't her choice, I don't think. It was God's choice. Why was it God's choice to use a woman at that time?
The men were spineless.
Qualified men step up.
I don't know that it's as much of strength, although I would say they're weak men at the time. As much as it is, she is right with God, thereby allowed and blessed with the gift of prophecy. So when they need God to speak, if you watch Saul until he got in big trouble, and you watch David, and they've got enemies, what do they want? They want to talk to the high priest or the prophet. What's God say I should do next? What God say I should do next? So I don't know that Barak is so much needing Deborah's leadership in strength as much as, okay, what's God want me to do now? The enemy is advancing on this hill. Do we go that way or do we go to the left? always inquiring of the Lord on our next move.
But,
David did that a lot.
but the problem is, why is she in that position and no other man?
Because they're not holy. They have been evil for decades. So there are fewer and fewer people you can go to, prophets and prophetesses. I'm saying that wrong. But nevertheless, people with the gift of prophecy are fewer and far between than in good times, when God sees a good number of Israelites that he would bless with that ability.
But you're saying they're not necessarily weak, they're just weak spiritually. That's the problem.
Right, they're disgraced spiritually, and God's not going to bless them, but he will bless her.
And he
So
did.
when she asks, like when Saul, he gets in trouble, God's not talking to him anymore.
Yep.
Well, when she asks God, he will talk to her.
So, okay.
It's a testament to her holiness, not to her commanding, being a good general or whatever. They want to know what's the next move that God says we ought to do.
So I guess basically, Barak is treating her like they treated the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant. We'll bring that out there, and then God is with us because we got the Ark, and we can win the battle. We got Deborah. We can beat anybody, and we got Deborah with us. Basically, how they're treating her. She's the prophet of God. We got the prophet of God with us. So that's basically what they're looking at. So that's why he probably wanted her to go with him. I want you right here with me. So, but you know what? It's a shame. You gotta bring a woman. I'm not saying it because it's a woman, but you gotta bring somebody that's with God. Why don't you get with God yourself? That's the problem. You know, Barak should have said, I need to straighten my life up to take off. I got a lot of loose ends here I need to tie up and get stronger with God, and then I don't need to have her beside me. That's what he should have done. So, yes. But Deborah's judging took place outside, not in public. Deborah tried diligently to defer to male leadership, seeking to persuade Barak to take the lead. You go and lead the army and do it. It's yours to do. But he wouldn't do it without her. She rebuked him when he would not go without her. The glory was given to Jael, not Deborah, which, if you read the story and stop at the end of chapter 4, you'd think, that's Deborah, she's going to do it. But it wasn't. It was not. It was given to Jael, all the glory. The psalm for Israel is specifically said to be sung together with Deborah and Barak, not by the woman alone. So another instance, So yes. So anyway, that's the woman. Then you had Jael, which is the person that actually took care of Sisera, drove the tent peg through his head. And we had Vicky said, "Are you taking show and tell tonight?" I told her no. I think we saw enough of that Sunday. But I wanted to, a good PowerPoint, I thought it was. You got a tent peg this big around, and you got one that. I saw both of them on the internet when I was researching how big is a tent peg. I just put it in there, and they'd be like 1 inch by 12 inches up to 2 foot. And I saw the thing in the picture of the tents they had put up a couple of years back in a reenactment. Bedouin people over there, they still live in tents. They still use goat hair for the top of it. They still use rugs for the floor. It's just like it was done in Abraham's day. And I saw the tent. It was sticking out of the ground 1.5 foot. You could really knock your shin with that thing. And it was big around as your arm or bigger. I said, that's what I'm thinking.
I had a very nice Jewish girl, very smart. And she was my draftsman. She was a Jewish girl, and when she was in her late teens, she went to Israel and she lived with the Bedouins for 9 months. And she said it was the worst experience in her life.
I can imagine.
She said, first of all, they don't bathe very often because there's really not a lot of places to bathe. And so at first, she said for the first 2 or 3 weeks, she couldn't even stand herself, but she said after that, it didn't bother her at all.
Yeah.
But she said, these Bedouins are very tough.
Mhm.
They're rugged, tough, and resilient, but they're very, very kind people. And so it's an interesting group that still exists.
And you brought up the point that the women's was their duty to put the tents up. And it was like 3 rows of poles, short ones on the outside, tall ones in the middle, and it made the A-frame. You stretched the goat hair. It was like a felt, but it was goat hair woven together. And when it got wet, they said the fibers would swell up and it become waterproof. I guess 9 or 10 months out of the year, it didn't need to be waterproof because it didn't rain that much. But still, that's what they used, and they're still using that over there today. So yeah, the women would have been real handy with a hammer and a tent peg. And it wasn't a little tent peg you'd buy at Dick's Sporting Goods where you get a little metal tent about that big, about big around. No, they had to go in sand.
When, I was trying to read some things for this class and to answer some of these questions, and it seems that there's a lot of people who have a problem with Jael because she murdered someone.
Yeah.
But she murdered someone who was very bad. And then someone put out, what about Saul and the Amalekites? He was supposed to go in and kill babies, pregnant women, men, animals, everything. Completely annihilate them. That was from God's word. So I guess this person was trying to say, we can't judge people based on our own feelings. God is in control, and sometimes His control does things that make us scratch our heads.
Yep, I had 3 comments. I've run across that myself, and I've made 3 comments. I wrote them down right here. It said, did God know Jael's heart? God knows everybody's heart. God used Jael in the victory. God doesn't tempt anyone with evil. That's the truth. That's what it says in James. God does not tempt anyone with evil. Did He put her in a position that He's going to cause her to do something wrong?
I don't think she did wrong.
I don't either. I feel like she did what she had to do to keep. I don't know that she was anywhere associated with the Jews, the Israelites, but she knew what Sisera did to people. And her family may be next, because they're there. So yes, I feel like you take care of the problem. So again, God put her in a position and she knew what to do, gave him some milk, made him get sleepy and took care of it. So yes, it's I wrote those 3 things down there, God knows that her heart, which He does, He knows everybody's heart. Did He use her? He did. And God doesn't tempt anybody with evil. So, did He put her there in a position to have make a decision now if I want to kill him or do I let him go? That's not. I think He knew what her intentions were.
Well, that's kind of like Rahab lying about the spies.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody. Yeah.
And I keep thinking more about what Steve was saying too, not to go back to that necessarily, but women were like property. So for Deborah to be in a situation where everybody would listen to her, men even listened to her, and she judged the people. So it didn't say she just judged the women and children, she judged the people. So just the fact that that is an unusual spot for her to be in, considering how men sold women, just like they did animals, and treated women like,
Well, I have the utmost respect. I know 2 women, and I'm not excluding anybody in here, but I know 2 women that really stand out. And that was Mary Heaton, and I told Safe that would have been his grandmother-in-law if she'd been alive. I said she'd make a preacher sweat. The questions she asked. I don't know. I have to study to find out. And the other one was Leo's sister, Jean. she's another one that asks questions, and she's asked me questions and made comments about stuff I did at the table, at the Lord's table. She goes, why did you do that? How do you get the, I go, oh, here we go. You know, and she's probably listening right now, and I appreciate that. There's two women that it don't matter who you are or what you are. If you're a thinker, more power to you. I don't care if you're a woman or a man. And that's, she was, both of those women were they were scary. They still are, probably. Well, one of them still definitely scary. So I remember when I went to Mary Heaton's funeral in Kent, the one that just lost his son, and his dad had passed away a couple of years before, and Kent told me, he says, well, I can hear my dad up there now. He says, I warned y'all, here she is, I warned you. He said, yeah, she's going to be asking questions. So that was the way she was. She was a student of the Bible. And that's the best thing you can be called next to being a Christian, a student of the Bible.
Another woman I met, I don't know if anybody knows her, but Ann White.
She's passed.
She's passed now, but she was Mike White. Anyways, I knew her. That's Todd Snap's mother-in-law. But she used to give Old Testament lessons, New Testament lessons, and the women and all this. And during her eulogy, there was a lot of women who got up there and said that they learned more about the Bible from that woman. And I'm sure that there's many just like that. But one of the things about women in those times, I tried to find some more information. They were not allowed to go into the inner temple. The other thing that's interesting is she was a judge, a prophetess, but she was a judge. But women weren't allowed to go in the court.
That's why she did it outside the city, under a palm tree. Yeah. She knew her place.
But here she is, she's making judgments for the whole country, for all of Israel, yeah. and yet she can't go into court.
Well, that would be overstepping your bounds. Yeah. I may be called to do something, but she had to know the social ramifications, the social limitations. Don't go in the temple. Don't go in the court. That's not where you belong. You've got a job to do, but you don't do it there.
And the Old Testament actually doesn't talk much about it, except when a woman has her period, that she has to be restricted in a different way. But the Talmud, the old ancient writings, there's many of them that's still in existence. They have a whole slew of things that women can and cannot do. So it was definitely a man's world as far as the spiritual hierarchy.
It definitely was, yes. And I am not agreeing with that, but if this is the way society said it's going to be and God's okayed it, then we don't argue with that. Yes, Kevin?
We also have to keep in mind, we're talking about Deborah and God allowing her or appointing her or whatever to be in this position to judge Israel. We also have to keep in mind, not all the judges were righteous, and God used other countries to judge Israel too. Yeah. It was a form of punishment to Israel to whip them back into shape or to punish them so there's that judging isn't, hey, I'm a judge and I'm in this position of authority. It's to carry out a mission against God. So just because it's a woman doing it doesn't mean that it's a preaching position or a priest position.
What you just said about not all the judges were right. We're going to talk about one next week. Samson, he was a judge. He was just a goofball. I'm telling you. I'm being nice. He was not right in more ways than he's just a goofball. I'm telling you. He was a judge, but he still couldn't get his act together. So yes, they weren't all up and coming. But she was the best they had. So that was the Deborah. What about Jael? She did what she had to do. She was put in a position. You had a choice to make, and she made it. And I guess you have to. When you're put in a position like that, you make a choice based on what you think is right. And in our case, we would study to see what our options are, and then you go with it and you live with what decision you made. I mean, that's just the way it is. You know, you can't be wishy-washy when you got a man sleeping on your floor and you gotta either walk out, let him sleep, or you put a tent peg through his head. Big choices there. And then you got Sisera's mother, the third woman in the story, and she's at home wondering why he's so late coming home. Maybe he got stuck in traffic. You know? Happens. Yes, those chariots, they just don't run good on muddy roads. But that was ironic that they brought her into the picture, you know, and it shows even for evil people, they have mothers too. I guess.
But wasn't she wanting stuff from him?
Well, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
she's
and it
waiting.
wasn't that-
He's
oh,
late,
my
but he's
son.
he's probably getting all the stuff packed up and bringing it back. Yeah.
She just seemed like she was kind of.
New linens, new handmaids, all kinds of stuff he's coming home with. No, not really. And every one of his soldiers, every one of them died. They took out the whole army. Every man of Sisera died by the blade. Look on 56 there. Let's do the questions, and we'll call this thing covered unless y'all have some questions or answers that Greg wants to answer. Okay. All right. The match column A with column B. True. Sisera's king. Who was the king of the Canaanites? Jael. And it's kind of odd. It's not like he's the king of the Hittites. He's not the king of the Philistines. It said he's the king of the Canaanites. Wasn't that a bigger area? Wasn't that the whole area? It wasn't just these little countries in here, these little groups. This was the Canaanites. All of them. So he was a serious player there. Okay, who was the reluctant warrior? Yeah. He could have been the next leader, but he couldn't get it together. A female judge. Deborah. Yes. And she knew where I'm not saying that in an ugly way, but she knew where her place was. She knew what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable in God's sight and in the society's sight. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't think I'd put a lot of emphasis on the society because they were pretty crummy right now. So that'd be trying to say, well, society says I can dress this way right now. And that wouldn't probably fit real well. You know, just don't do what society says. Do what God says. You know, you gotta draw the line somewhere. So yes, Sisera's killer.
Jael.
The wood. Jael.
Peggy's not on the list.
Peggy's not on the whole now.
I guess we'll say Peggy's not on the list.
Very good. And who was a Kenite?
Eber.
Who?
Eber.
And that was who?
Jael's husband.
Jael's husband. And he was known as he was a metal worker. Yeah. So the Kenites were metal workers, right? But yes, okay. Multiple choice or true and false. Wow. What did Jael use to kill Sisera? Wooden tent peg. And I still say she had to pop him in the head first before she drove it in there. Because I don't think you could get the first lick, you couldn't get it far enough to make it. It couldn't come unglued. I think he would have. No, that thing coming out of my head, I'm not dead yet. I think she whacked him in the head and it says that in the Song of Deborah, that she struck him and then drove the peg through there. I think that's the way it makes sense. Because I don't think you can get a hard enough lick one time to get it all the way through. They said that bone, maybe it's the jawbone, the temporal bone right below it there, is the second hardest bone in the whole body.
Yeah, but 1 inch above it is the softest.
Okay, well that's where she went, in the temple.
Well, there has to be a whole lot of things that had to be just right, I think. You know,
But she had to have
he
that
had to be
tent peg.
really sleepy. And the
Okay,
milk had to be really, you know, perfectly to hit it.
perfect. Yeah.
And, because if she would have, you know, if he would have woke up while she was trying to, I mean, she was very brave, so that was another,
Yes.
There was a lot of things that, it was like the perfect storm coming together.
And like I said, once you make up your choice, now you gotta live with your choice and go with it. Yes, it's like,
Well, I'm not sure, but I would think that once the 10 days halfway in, there's no fighting after that.
I'm just,
I would think,
I don't wanna sound ugly or really sound gross, but the animals that I put down, they're wiggling a lot before they quit. And a tent peg, if it's halfway through your head, you're gonna wiggle a lot. So,
There's some other thing, of course, I mentioned that there's three different chemicals in warm milk that put you to sleep. But here's a guy that's just been in a battle. He's probably completely been out of sleep. He's had a huge battle and he's running away from the enemies. He probably got to our tent, he was totally exhausted. And everything worked, and we don't, and the other thing we don't think about is, maybe we did, but God's involvement in all of this, you know.
I wondered if she rolled him up in the rug on the floor, but it said a blanket. That's the first thing I thought. They have rugs on the floor so you don't walk on the dirt. If he laid down, she rolled him up. He's not going anywhere now. You're like a hot dog in a bun. That's it. You're not going to. But it says it's put a blanket over him. So I had it all figured out in my head until I read blanket. I said, well, that's not a rug. So that was what they put on the floors. And in my mind, if you laid down and rolled him up, he don't matter. You could have tickled him to death. He couldn't have got out. But it says blanket, so we'll go with the blanket. Okay. There was a vicious battle between the Israelites and Canaanites near where?
He on the above.
All the above.
Well, it was near Medigo, but it was in the valley of Jezreel.
And the plain was.
Okay, I had my ghetto.
Yeah, but that is near Megiddo.
Okay. Okay, we'll go with that. To whom was the glory given for this great victory?
Jael.
Okay. And in a roundabout way, she's the human that got all, but then God got all the glory too. And they sang the song, yes, but she's the one that in the list, correct. And what Jewish festival remembers the weaving of this story, from this story?
Rosh Hashanah.
Yep.
Rosh Hashanah.
And that is from the signifying the sighings of Sisera's mom. Yeah, 100 sighs. So, yes, it's funny that they have a Jewish holiday to remember the enemy's mom. That's kind of, I don't know, that gets you.
It says the 100 blasts of the shofar. 100 blasts of the shofar for like 100 cries.
Yep.
Those were shofar guys' names.
I think that's kind of odd, though, that the enemy's mother is remembered in a Jewish holiday.
Well, that's not all, because it's about the fact that they sinned against God.
Yeah. Who is pictured as having been very anxious after the battle is over?
Sisera's mother.
Yep. Sisera's mother. When is he going to get home? Yeah. If she would listen for those hooves on the road, yeah, just that's what it said. You hear the sound of the hooves coming in, just not having. Okay. Now here we go the open-ended the questions you have to think about. Tell about Sisera's reputation as a warrior prior to his battle with the Israelites. He's 11-0, right? Undefeated. Never lost a battle. He's got a reputation when he talks, if they know he's coming over the hill, the battle's half won right there. Just lay your stuff down because he's going to beat us. That's just the way they're thinking. Yes. How is Judges 5:19-21 interpreted by the rabbis who commented on it later? Let's read that before we make a comment. 5:19-21. He said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink. Then she covered him. And he said to her, "Stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and inquires of you and says, 'Is there anyone here?' that you shall say no." But Jael Eber's wife, took a tent peg and seized a hammer in her hand, and went secretly to him and drove the peg into his temple, and it went through into the ground, for he was sound asleep and exhausted. So he died. Man, 5? I'm in Rome. Well, that sounded good anyway. Okay. Chapter 5 now. We'll read the right one. Okay. The kings came and fought, fought the kings of Canaan. At Tanakh, near the waters of Megiddo, they took no plunder in silver. The stars fought from heaven. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon, which is a river. O my soul, march on with strength. Then the horses' hooves beat from the dashing of his valiant steeds. Yes, that's what. So what did they say about this? The stars fought from heaven. Their courses fought against Sisera, the torrent. What are they saying happened? The old rabbis, the midrash.
What are they saying happened?
What I got is that God fought from heaven by sending a great storm which flowed the Kishon River and drowned many kings.
Yep, that's what they're saying. Let me see. It's one of those gray areas in the lesson there. Yeah, the very first page there. They say that they interpreted by rabbis to mean that God fought from heaven, sending a great storm. Just what Steve just said. That they got the river swelled up. It got flooded. The chariots won't be able to work. You can't run one through the mud. So they're overwhelmed. They're beaten by God. Okay, and that's probably completely true. I mean, you think about God did things that made it possible for the Israelites to win a battle they shouldn't have won. You know, think about it. They went down into the valley. Why wouldn't they fight in the mountains? You can't run a chariot in the mountain. It's not going to work. They had to be in the flat valleys between the mountains. That's where they went. So it's everything says God beat this general, this captain, by himself. The Israelites kind of just mopped up afterwards. It was God fighting for them.
Well, they fought quite a battle, the Israelites, because a lot of men died by the sword, so that would have been the Israelites' sword.
Yeah, but the battle was beaten by God, the whole battle, basically. Okay, let's see. Identify some good women whom God used in time to deliver his message. The prophetesses. Who would have been another example?
Miriam.
Miriam, okay. Who was Miriam? Moses' sister? Okay. And then you had Deborah.
I've got one that I don't know who she was. Huldah, 2 Kings 22, and Anna, Luke 2, 36 to 38.
Yeah, Anna's the one that saw Jesus. Yeah, and prophesied. Yeah, so there were prophetesses in the New Testament, Old Testament, yes. And it's not like somebody said. I don't know. It might have been Greg. It was not a matter of I'm stronger. I'm better at using a sword. I'm better at. I'm not a better army person. These people, these women were stronger spiritually. That's what we got to work on. It doesn't matter what we can do physically, it's what we can do spiritually. Okay, let me see. What 3 general areas of service are women in the New Testament restricted? Okay, that number 15. What general areas, 3 general areas of service are women in the New Testament restricted?
Okay.
Elder.
Elder, that's one first one I thought of. Elder.
In collective spiritual headship of any kind.
Okay, that would be like leadership. And is that even the same as eldership? I mean, they're two kind of overlap. But yes, there's teaching. Okay, so there's things that a woman can do, and there's things that the women right here in this audience do that probably nobody knows about. That's the way it's supposed to be. You don't do things to be shown. You know, you don't do things so somebody, look what he did or what she did. These are things that need to be done, but they don't have to be, you know, about being, congratulations, you did it. No, there's things that need to be done every day.
And the silence in the assembly is something that the world has considered Paul to be a chauvinist about, but he was
Yes.
just writing what the Holy Spirit had given him.
Okay, number 17, what message do you see in this story for us? What can we get out of this story that can apply to us today and help us today?
God's plans are fulfilled with many varied people, both sexes and strange ways sometimes.
Other nationalities, okay. Women have a place. They're not useless. They're not to be overtrodden or ignored. Women have capabilities that some men don't have. It's separate. Maybe you might have a capability for teaching or something that nobody in here has. So yes, there's things that women are not second-class Christians.
Sometimes it's the least one that you expect God to use. It's like he's always used somebody that was the youngest or didn't have, you don't see their abilities, God sees it, God sees their heart, you know. So a lot of times it's just somebody that it's an unsung hero.
Yep. That's the best kind. That's the best kind. Sir? Okay, well, that's it. We're going to start with Delilah come Sunday morning.
What's the Song of Invitation? Song of Invitation. Two, three, one, two.
312.
312.
There were 312 already.
312.
Trying to do the sign language to you like you did to us last week.
If you would, turn with me to the 3rd chapter of Colossians, please. I'm going to be reading 2 or 3 verses out of Colossians 3, beginning in verse 12. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. I just want to go over 3, maybe 4 little points. First of all, have hearts of compassion and kindness. These are the very virtues that Christ had himself. And if we want to have true Christ-likeness, then we need to have, that should be the goal of every Christian, is to be like-minded in compassion and kindness. And the next one that I'd like to consider is, it says, above all these things, put on love. So we have a whole list of things that we should be doing, but he said, on top of all of this, love needs to have its place. And to me, what that means is, it's not like he's adding love as an additional Christian grace we should have, but it's almost like he's saying that love is kind of like the cement that holds all of this together. You know, if we don't have love, it's hard to be kind, it's hard to be considerate, it's hard to show love. A little kindness, love kind of puts all of this in one package. And here's one. When Paul writes, he talks a lot about being thankful. And you know, if we consider the Lord's Prayer, when the Lord was asked how to pray, and he said, "Our Father who art in heaven," there's no mention, not a single word about thanksgiving in that prayer. But I think the reason is because of the time frame. Jesus had yet to die on the cross and to open up the New Testament. And so now, after the Testament is open, Christ has established this new kingdom. And so the teachings of Paul go on as joyful as any of the things he said. And so we have to remember to be very thankful. Now here's another one. It says, let the word of Christ dwell in you. You know, of all the passages that you could have in the New Testament, the word of Christ dwell in you, it's almost like as if it's an absolute saying here that says that whatever Jesus said, that's part of the word that we have to listen to. And let me see where I wrote this down. Oh, I said that the word of Christ dwelling in a person is equivalent in every way to the Spirit that indwells in us. One of the things that I thought about that I think we need to mention now and then is it says to encourage us with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Psalms are obviously spiritual, and hymns by definition would be spiritual, but it's not like we can use any song, because he says it's spiritual songs. So there's significantly not even all songs are not permissible in a worship service. There's some people that sing all kinds of songs, and, especially more modern worship services that do not sound very spiritual. And so we have to be careful what we use in our worship service. And it says, with grace in your hearts, and I think that means more of thankfulness. Now, I was talking about Christ, the teaching of Christ. He said, let the word of Christ dwell in you. This is one of the most definite passages in the New Testament which nails down the identification of Christian doctrine, and it includes the message delivered by Christ. All messages delivered by Christ are part of the Christian doctrine. He said, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. And so when I remember when I was thinking about that, I said, oh, what about the Great Commission? That's certainly the word of Christ. That would be part of Christian doctrine. What were they to do? They were to go. Where were they to go? To all nations. And do what? Baptize them. In what name? The name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That Great Commission, you know, is very, it's very short and very explicit. Then what? He says, teach them to observe all that I have commanded you, that Jesus has commanded us. Not just a few things. He said, teach them all that I have commanded you. And the results, it says Jesus will be with his disciples always to the end of the earth. We can be really comforted by all of that, knowing that when we obey what Jesus said, what the gospel teaches, that Jesus is going to be with us till the end of the age, until he come again.